This is Birthing at Home, a podcast. I'm Elsie, your host. I'm a home birth mum of 2 little boys, a doula in Melbourne supporting birth at home. I'm a mental health nurse and the co-creator of Homebirth Victoria. If you want to learn more about me, the podcast, or my work as a doula, check out www.birthingathome.apodcast. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land I'm recording on in Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. I would also like to acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have been birthing at home on country for tens of thousands of years prior to the British invasion and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. Episode 55 is shared today by Emilie. Emilie is a doula and a home birth after cesarean mama who today shares her 2 extremely different experiences, birthing her first baby Reuben under general anaesthetic during COVID in the UK, and then having her daughter Bronte here in Melbourne, who she got us squatted out in an incredible home birth. If you enjoy this episode, please rate or review it on Spotify or Apple. I'm really trying to get to 50 reviews or ratings on Spotify and Apple before the end of the year. Every bit really, really helps. Enjoy. Welcome, Emilie, to Birthing at Home, a podcast.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome.
Thank
all
you
the
so
way
much for
from
me.
like 15 minutes away from me. We could have actually done this in person, really.
Oh, I actually would have loved that.
Yeah. Do you want to give a bit of background to who you are, Emilie? Who's in your family? You're obviously located very close to me, but...
Yeah. Hello, I'm Emilie. I go by she, her pronouns. I live in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. I'm originally from England, but we moved here about 3 years ago after my eldest was born. In my family, I have my favourite person in the world, my husband. He's called Jacob. He's brilliant. And then a wild 3-year-old who's curious and magical and being 3 in all of the ways.
Yeah.
And then our youngest is Bronte, my daughter.
Beautiful. And so today you're going to share your C-section birth with Rue, a little bit of a backstory for then what I believe is going to be a very magical story of the birth of Bronte, who was a home birth after cesarean, right?
Yeah.
And so Reuben was born in England and Bronte was born here in Melbourne.
Yeah. And we moved in the middle, which was a bit of a plot twist, but I'm sure we'll cover it.
Yeah, cool. I guess to start off with, like, what, especially coming from England, like my sort of thoughts about England is that home birth is really accessible and like I don't know what the rates of home birth are like in England, but I imagine it. I mean, anywhere could be higher than Australia.
Yeah, they are higher. I don't know the rates, but just anecdotally, I have friends who home birth, whereas here I have no friends in my inner circle that. And sometimes when I say like, oh, I often say, to be honest with you, I had a home birth with my daughter. Everyone's like, oh, really? How did you do that?
Yeah.
What does that look like? It's like I'm speaking a different language, whereas in England, that's quite a common and accessible option. Yeah. And it's publicly funded as well through the NHS. So I think, we have publicly funded programs here, but I guess the risk tolerance is just a bit different.
Yeah. And so coming from, the UK, like what was your understanding of pregnancy or like birth growing up? Do you remember?
Honestly, not loads. My mum had 3. I'm the eldest of 3, and I was breech birth, and she had 3 cesareans. But really, the narrative around birth is that my mum's narrative was we had the most 3 like greatest blessings of our lives, and it's always more about the baby, and not so much about the birthing process at all. It's not something I've even really dived into. But I didn't have. Obviously, I had a narrative around what birth looks like just from the media and growing up as a woman, but it wasn't something that I was particularly surrounded by or there was not much conversations around it. I always was fascinated by kids. Like I just love kids. And so I always knew that I'd love to be a mum one day. That was something that I really aspired or hoped for me. And yeah, I wouldn't say I was fearful of birth or anything like that. I just didn't really have a robust understanding of it. I mean, it's interesting as I say that, because when I reflect on it now, I'm literally completely obsessed and fascinated by birth. So it's an interesting like development, and I think about like, oh, it wasn't really on my radar until I sort of became a little bit older.
And now it's like fully in front of you, like that is like your whole world essentially, because you're also a doula in Melbourne.
So I'm a mental health professional I'm in the eating disorder space, and then also a birth and postpartum doula as well, which I absolutely love. It's like I feel like it called me. Well,
I feel like it must have, especially if you've had like this big, you know, story arc on like not really knowing anything about birth, and then now being in the world of birth. And so when you became pregnant with Reuben, did you have an idea of like what was your hope, or like did you do you get education in England, or like what was that journey like?
So we became pregnant with Rue in the midst of like right bang in the first lockdown in the UK. So it was definitely an interesting experience. I feel like anyone who shares their story is like, we were pregnant in COVID. It was just like, it's very hard to explain or even sometimes really reflect on it, but it was definitely a unique experience. In a way, it was really protective for me, because for both my pregnancies, I had HG for the first bit of time. Luckily not for the whole pregnancy. Like, oh my gosh, like I would not wish that on anyone. But in a way, for me, that was quite helpful, just not seeing anybody for a while, because I just didn't have the capacity to see anybody for a while. But we were so excited to be pregnant. It was our third pregnancy, so we were really excited to be pregnant, but I guess the joy was a bit different. Like it felt like a little bit of a different journey than sort of the first two of our babies. So so I guess I just was like navigating week by week. It was COVID, so it was a lot to get your head around anyway. But I guess like so many stories, I was young, fit, healthy, active, really like prioritized my own self-care and my mental health and my physical health. And so I really just thought, right, well, this is what everyone's intention is to look after me. I'll have the baby in our local hospital where everybody else is sort of birthing. I didn't really give it that like much thought. I hoped for a low intervention birth, and I think that's because I was like, oh, I'm fit and healthy, and I run and do yoga and all of that sort of thing. And there's no reason why, anything would be different for me. So we did education. It was all online. So I do think that is a different experience as well. I read some books, you know, but I really feel like a lot of my birth preparation was my mental preparation, my mental mindset of like what was coming up for me, my relationships, my connection with myself and my body. I think being pregnant for me is quite challenging, particularly feeling sick and for my body. But I feel like this sense of when I'm both my pregnancies, I've sort of felt this amazing sense of connection to myself and my inner world that I guess I haven't experienced like that before. And so I would say a lot of my preparation was just around that connection to self and my intentions and my hopes and my baby and that sort of intuition that we are not really encouraged to really access. And then suddenly we are in like the, you know, what's your, you know, all of that instincts and questions like, just follow your instincts. Like, what do they say? And I'm like, well, I've actually never done that before. So I've got to learn about that first. And so that was a really beautiful journey for me when I was pregnant with Rue.
Do you have like midwifery, like is midwifery care, like, is it similar or rather different?
I went through the public system and it was COVID. So all of my appointments were alone. There were 20 minutes with a mask on. It was a different midwife every time. Although actually I lucked out a few times and got the same midwife a few times.
Okay.
I was really, as a mental health professional and just managing my own mental health on a day-to-day basis, I was really proactive in sharing a lot of the things that I thought would come up for me that that I might need extra support around. So I actually did get support from the hospital just to like, manage those sorts of considerations, I suppose. So that was really great. But yeah, like the maternity system, I feel like my reflection of the English maternity system is not normal because it was COVID.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But honestly, like I was so excited to be pregnant. I was, just so looking forward to being a mum. I have such a wonderful supportive family who were all so thrilled for us. Like we were the first couple to have a baby in our family. So on both sides. So there's that element of like excitement, and it just really felt precious to be carrying life when the world is upside down. Like, and that sort of, it just felt like a really, really special time.
Yeah. And do you want to give us a bit of an overview of how like the labour and birth of Reuben played out?
Yeah. So I finished work, and I was like I didn't actually think about the idea that I would have to wait for a baby. Yeah. I think like I can really empathise with anyone who's sort of waiting for their baby to be born, because that sort of time, just not knowing if it's going to be in 3 hours or 2 weeks, it's just a complete trip for me. And I am someone who loves to plan. So that was something that I really had to like start becoming comfortable with. Yeah. And we were desperate to meet this little person. So I did not rest in those weeks. I was doing all the things, Googling how do I naturally, all of that, how do I naturally juice, which I never did for my second child. I was like, how can I lie down? So I was like walking and, up and down the stairs, blah, blah, blah. So I was 39. I didn't even go over due. Like Reuben was born on his due date. Wow. But it's still like any time after, I think I got into my head, any time after 38 weeks the baby can come. Yeah. So my due date in my head was 38 weeks.
Yeah. Well, it's possible then. So you're like, well, I mean, anything could happen.
Do I have this? Yeah. Like what's the comms tree? Who are we telling? Like, so all of that. So I went into, it's funny looking back on it now, because it was my first time, obviously, ever having a baby. And I didn't take full responsibility for the decision, because I did a lot of education on sort of my intuition and connection, but I didn't fully grasp all, like I feel like I have a much better understanding of birth now. But I woke up on the Friday and I just knew, I was just like, things feel different. And I really was like, I think I'm going to be birthing quite soon. But that made sense. It was a day before my due date, a few days before my due date. So I was like, I think this is coming. Something's happening. And I had a trickle of waters. I honestly, Elsie, I was like, I've peed myself. And honestly, at that point, that was a common experience. I was like, is it wee? Is it my waters? I'm not sure. So I sort of just left it. I was just like, I don't know what it is, but I just carried on the day. But I definitely felt like I didn't say anything. Yeah. Because I didn't want to, honestly, I just didn't want to get myself excited, because I was so desperate to meet our baby. But
and especially like for me, at least, like, anytime past 37, 38, like in my mind, I was like, oh, well, if something happens now, it might not even be the real deal. Yeah. So I don't want to get my hopes up in case this happens for days or weeks.
Yeah. And also we're at the tail end of COVID at this point, and honestly, every day is Groundhog Day. So I was like, maybe today I can do something other than go for a walk around the block. Hooray. So I didn't say anything, but I definitely felt like I was having contractions, and they were very manageable, just felt like period pains. Didn't say anything, but it sort of progressed as the day went on, slowly but surely. And then by the evening, I said to I finally said something to my husband. I said, I actually think I might be leaking waters. I'm not sure, but I sort of had that sense today, and I really, I feel a bit like periody, and I've been sort of breathing through some sensations that are not familiar to me, but I'm not sure. And we had this file that that we got given in England, where when you go through the public system, you get this file which you keep all your notes in. And on the side, it says, if you think your waters break, call the number.
Sure, yeah.
So my husband was like, well, should we call the number? If you think it might be your waters, should we call your number? I'm like, oh, I'm not sure. Like, maybe not. I think it's happening, but I don't know. Anyway, we sort of had dinner, talked about it, and then I was like, all right, I'll give them a call. So I gave the hospital a call, and they said, oh yeah, come in, and we'll just like see if it's your waters. Anyway, that was my like biggest regret, I think, is going in at that point, because of COVID, once you were in, you were in. They didn't send you back because when you came in, you had a COVID test, and then I was negative. And then that we were in. So I had my waters, I had the check literally within 30 seconds. They were like, yep, your waters are broken. We'd really like to keep you in. Again, I didn't question that. I just thought, in my head, I was like, my waters are broken. My baby's going to be born probably in the next 24 hours. I'm so excited. I'm going to have a baby on my due date. But didn't really fully consider what was happening and sort of that, what that meant. So at that point, my husband wasn't allowed in with me because of the restrictions. So they called him up and they said, yep, her waters are broken and you're having a baby.
So you had to go in, be checked without any support.
No. Yeah, it gets worse, honestly. Anyway, so we talked about what would happen from then, how that would go. They were like, yep, come, let's admit you onto the ward. So I went onto the ward. And they basically. So
you by yourself at this time?
I'm with Jake, my husband.
Okay.
And he moves me into the ward. They all move me in. I set up my space. This is in a shed. I have the curtains and stuff, but there's other women on the ward, which is just a weird experience when you are in labour, like to be in labour with other people. And I wasn't. It was definitely early labour at that point, but still, like you're in the space. I had my headphones on. I was trying to do all the things that I had learned by reading and creating my sort of safe place. And then they were like, okay, well, Jake has to go home now. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm in labour though. And they were like, well, you're not like, it's clearly not, you're not in active labour. We'll call him when you are. And at that point it was like maybe 11:30 at night. So I was like, I'm ready for bed. That sounds good. But also, bye babe. I'll see you in the morning. Like, please keep your phone on loud. So he left and I ended up labouring then, being in early labour on my own all night. And it was a pretty tricky time. I mean, it was hard in one sense, but also magical in another. Like, I really used that time. I sort of reframed it. I used that time. I was like, this is the last time I'm going to have my baby in my tummy. I really focused on the sensations. Yeah, refocused.
I
had my headphones in, my eye mask on. Like it sounds like when I say I had to labour on my own for 8 or 9 hours, I think it was, but actually that was one of my most treasured time in that labour, because I really was like, it's me and a baby, and I really get to connect. And I didn't ask for permission. I ran myself a bath. I know that wasn't allowed because my waters were broken, but no one really cared because it was like 3 a.m. and I was like, I just want to have a shower and a bath, and that means I can get off this noisy ward where they check you all the time. Like, I just want to kind of retreat. So I just ran myself a bath and got in there and just really used that time for myself, and it was really nice. But I was awake all night on my own, and I was tired by the time the morning came. The morning came, they came in and they were like, yeah, we're going to move you now onto birth suite. And at this point I'm sort of more in labour. But as soon as I got into the birth suite, everything just stopped. Like the birth suite was just lights and brights, and also I was just desperate to have my husband there, and I feel like my body was like, you can't continue until you have some support, because you're like in that time. So so I had my husband. I rang my husband. He came. I mean, he was literally there. He'd barely slept either, because he was like, well, what's going to happen? And then things from that point started to progress. I ended up consenting to an exam. I wanted to know what was going on. That led to some conversations around that speed things along. You've been in labour, that's, your waters have been broken, risk of infection, blah, blah, blah. And that, again, I wasn't fully across sort of the edge, like the risk and the benefits. The way that the information was portrayed to me was very biased in terms of, we want to, let's hook you up to the drip, blah, blah, blah. I had a really pretty, I hadn't slept, I hadn't eaten. I've obviously been in labour for a while now, early labour, but still, took my attention. And they were trying, this midwife, who I did not really vibe with at all. And it's amazing how your support team really can influence your experience. I feel like I can still now name the student midwife who I absolutely loved in that space, and I can name the midwife that I didn't. And it's really interesting. Like, I'm always banging on about who is in your book, but like, who do you want as your birth support? Because it can massively impact like your hormones and how you feel. But I ended up having the drip, what's it called that you put in your
the IV.
Yeah, the IV. And,
IV drip.
I just passed out. I just completely passed out, lost consciousness. And that was pretty stressful because they pressed the red button. Everyone was in.
Wow.
And I had to have an ECG.
Oh, so when they're putting it in, then you've passed out. Wow.
Yeah, I think I was a mid contraction, wasn't really sure what was happening, and then I blacked out, and that was scary. Everyone came in. My husband was pushed aside. And it took a while. Like I was fine afterwards. I just came to, and they gave me some water and blah, blah, blah. But I think it took my body, at that point, my body was just like, and we are not labouring anymore. You have literally just passed out. And we are no longer in labour. So it took a long time for me. I say long, like I don't know if my body ever really recovered from that point, in terms of like, I was at that point quite frightened. I was tired. I was hungry.
Of course,
I just passed out. My husband was there, but he was in the corner. Like, it was a difficult time. We came to, and then the Syntocin started. And that just, as I'm sure you heard 1,000 times, that went from nothing to 100%
everything.
In no time. And I really, when I think about those surges, I had some really enjoyable experiences of those surges. I really felt like, for the first time, those sensations in my body, and I had my music, and I was watching Friends, and I did everything. But it really, like, within maybe half an hour, it took all of my being to be present with what my body was experiencing. And we did that for a while. Like, at this point, I've been in labour the day before that day, so pretty much all day. And they kept cranking up the Syntocin and yada yada. Yeah. I got to the end of the day, and I was absolutely wiped. And so they talked different options of what I could do. And I asked for the epidural. I wanted to have some rest, and at this point I was getting quite anxious. I was thinking, like, this is taking a really long time. I'm really at the end of all of my tools. I felt like I had used as many tools as I could in that moment, but really didn't have any more tools left. And again, like, the midwives, it was the changer of midwives, and that was sort of again threw me. And we hadn't been able to, because of the restrictions, once you were in your room, you couldn't leave your room. And again, I really felt like I needed a change of scene, but there was no scene to change. It was I
hadn't even thought about that. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and neither could my partner. My husband couldn't leave because he had a test and was in. So, like, he couldn't get food, and he was wavering. And it's just a lot to put on one person for support. Like, shouldn't be like, you can't leave the room and we can't get you any food, because, like, it's a lot for someone to have to hold. Anyway, I asked for the epidural. Long story short, epidural didn't work. And even when it didn't work, like, even at that point, things became an emergency situation. So we were very quick in that moment. It's all quite blurry.
And especially because you passed out, and so you're not nourished, your body's not nourished, you're probably dehydrated, like you got the drip happening, like
and
tired.
And I, like, you don't know what you don't know, right? Like, I now know all the different things, I do things differently, but actually at the time I was really just desperate to meet my baby. And and there are some beautiful parts of that labour that I think about. Like, in both of my labours, they are my favourite ever day with my husband, more than our wedding day. Like, I just feel like we connected in such a magical, primal way. And I think the reason I'm fascinated with birth is because we live in just this world that is so lacking authenticity, and that
everything's censored.
Everything's censored. And the thing that for me, that is like birth is the one primal thing left. If it's left alone.
Pretty much.
And it's like, for me, just this like beautiful, simple process. And I think when I think about that labour, there are all the things I do differently, but there were some beautiful moments with my husband. I really connected with all the tools that I had. I was really proud of myself. I felt like I made the best decision for me and my baby at every point. With what I knew at the time. So
of course.
The epidural, I thought would be the godsend. Honestly, I was so ready for a break. And my anxiety was getting on top of me at this point. And I was becoming quite overwhelmed by each contraction. And as soon as I started feeling overwhelmed, already the contractions were wild with the syntocin. But I was also getting like anxious about what was happening. And I sort of had this sense that something was wrong, but I was just too in the labour to really express that apart from with my voice. With my sounds, I should say. Anyway, so not long, the epidural didn't work. They tried a few different things. It wasn't working. And actually that for me was actually quite a painful process because obviously you're having a contraction and you're trying to have it. Yeah. And the idea that things are going to be a bit more manageable coming up then just makes it feel like, oh my gosh, hurry up. And it wasn't happening. But even like before we could figure that out, I sort of went into fight or flight mode. I think I kind of completely dissociated from what was going on, to be honest. I was just like, I can't be here in this moment. And then there was an emergency called. So that was a real whirlwind. Like I understand an emergency, but I also feel like there has to be a better way of communicating to women when that's happening. So we went down. There was conversations. I remember there being conversations, but I don't remember the conversations.
No, I mean, it's I find, I mean, as you would have experienced as well, supporting, families to, in their pregnancy and to birth and whatnot, like, you can have all of the knowledge, but whether you're having an amazing experience or you're having, this experience is so different to what you could ever have dreamt up or imagined. Like when you are giving birth in whatever way, you are in like a different realm, whether that's in a good realm or a bad realm. You're like not present. So like consent, that's not the time to be like doing consent things, talking about important, so I can completely understand that would all be a blur.
Yeah, it's all a blur. But what I do remember is we went down to the theatre and I was, again, I was having contractions and I was like trying to manage them. So I don't really remember that journey, but I remember it being pretty fast. It was a really, it's a really difficult time to explain, but I had to deliver under general anaesthetic for the safety of both of us. And honestly, it was just awful. But I think what was really interesting is the language that was used around that. So, so I delivered my son under general anaesthetic. I don't obviously have any recollection of what happened because I was asleep, but I woke up in a part of the hospital that I hadn't seen before. I was on my own. I didn't know where my baby was. And that was pretty bad, to be honest. But then one of the most amazing moments happened after that where my husband was with Rue at the time. So I had no concept of how long I was out for. I only know that now. But Rue was with this tiny little poppet was with my husband. And I just remember my husband just like swinging, like I know his story and that's his story to share. But I just remember him like this sense of, I could feel his sense of urgency to be with me. And like I was completely drugged up. I'd just woken up from the anesthetic. I had tubes. There was medical stuff going on for me. So
of course,
and he just like pushed open these double doors with zero regard for anybody else in the room. And he just was like, I need to see my wife. And just threw himself on top of me and we were just sobbing with each other, like being reunited. And all of my emotions and oxytocin and all of that beautiful stuff just went straight to Jake. Exploded, we're just like, and I had, honestly, until Rue, my little tiny gorgeous little squish, squeaked. I didn't even realize there was a baby on my chest because I was just like, I am so pleased to see you. And then I looked down and this beautiful little baby was on my chest and he was sucking his thumb and I sucked my thumb as a kid. And he had an ultrasound with Rue and he was sucking his thumb too. So I just like, as soon as I saw him, I was like, this is my baby, which was just such a godsend because I obviously like not seeing him being born was really difficult for me to process. But as soon as I saw him, I was like, this is my baby. He's sucking his thumb, and he latched straight away. And we just had it was a really difficult birth, and I've spent a lot of time processing it in lots of different ways. Like if anyone's listening who's had birth trauma before, like there's however you want to manage it is just, it's so hard. It's like the hardest work I've ever had to do is processing birth trauma. I did EMDR, counseling, like I did, weekly appointments. But it was really important for me to process what happened. And I feel like I'm at a place now where I can reflect on Rue's birth and see all the goodness that was there. And I was just delighted to meet him. I just was so thrilled he was here and okay, because of course there was a period of time where I didn't know if I was going to be okay or if he was going to be okay.
Of course.
The anaesthetist who put me under really used some language that was difficult. He told my husband and I to say goodbye. And for both of us, we really interpreted that as something.
Oh my goodness.
So that was really challenging. But I guess that sort of brings context to the reunion for me. I really didn't know what was going to happen. And I was,
holy moly,
when I was going under, I was like, please save the baby. And I felt like this real maternal instinct. And so when I met Rue, it was always going to be like, it was him. It was always here. And it was just so wonderful to, have him.
Just pausing here to let you know about this episode's sponsor. The Dear Me Mother-to-Be Pregnancy Journal was created for the brave women who want to be transformed during pregnancy. It is a one-of-its-kind pregnancy journal filled with 48 reflective questions to facilitate powerful inner work and healing and assist with mental preparation for labour and motherhood. It goes deep on many topics that commonly arise for women during pregnancy, such as addressing labour fears, the mother wound, and worries about motherhood. There are also many questions that can be shared with your pregnancy and birth support team. The questions were carefully formulated by experienced counsellor and homebirthing mother Stephanie Bavard. She was driven to create the journal after her own empowering pregnancy and birth experience and her knowledge of how powerful inner work can be during pregnancy. Dear Me Mother-to-Be is proudly a mum-run Australian business who ships Australia-wide. Visit the website www.dearmemother2be.com for your order and access free pregnancy resources.
And so the postpartum journey was different, I'd say. Like I was diagnosed with PTSD pretty much in the hospital. But when I reflect on my postpartum journey, the birth trauma was one thing, and it was an awful and huge thing to manage and deal with, and honestly really dark times. But if I reflect on my postpartum experience, I just had a wonderful postpartum. I had some beautiful support from my family. I felt surrounded by love and support and care. I felt like a goddess. Like I just felt like my body felt like I'd been hit by a bus.
Yeah, of course. I
just felt like I'd done something wonderful. There was this beautiful little person. We had some wonderful, because it was in England at that point, people were coming out of COVID and there were no restrictions anymore. Yeah. Whereas I think, I understand that it was a lot longer here. But that meant like people were coming, we had visitors, but they were like considered visitors because we were still in that COVID time. Like people would still be quite considerate about that.
Such a weird time.
Yeah, we had I breastfed Rue for 2 years. We had a beautiful journey, which really for me was an absolute godsend because I felt like I really attached to him. Yeah. And I just absolutely, like even now when I think about it, I just think there's nothing like having your first baby and that time where it's just like you can just stare
everything's
at them.
New.
Whilst they're asleep and like
they're breathing and like their movements.
It's just wonderful, and he's just. Yeah, he's such a brilliant and special boy, and it was just so. I was just so thrilled to meet him. I still feel grateful. Like even thinking about it now, I'm just like, I think it had that layer of like, I've met, like I didn't know what was going to happen, but now I have this beautiful person. So
that's really beautiful. That's like, that's so powerful, and I think that's very inspiring that you're able to, however many years on, be able to like share this story with me in this way for, all of the other people out there that have experienced birth trauma, and, you know, I imagine at some point you perhaps feel quite stuck, and will things ever be better? Like, will I get past this? And so I'm really, really grateful that you've shared that part of your journey.
Thanks. I think the biggest thing for me afterwards, I just felt like I'd failed somehow.
Yeah.
That, like, I wasn't awake for I must have failed. Like, I failed at the first hurdle because of what happened.
Yeah.
And now I feel like, gosh, I mean, you can't fail birth. Like, you literally have, like, you can't fail it. It's something you just can't. No. I am a perfectionist. I'm a recovering perfectionist. But I feel like that for me has been such an important unlearning. Yeah. That, like, you can't fail birth. Like, we can't control everything, but you can't, it's not something you can fail. And so I think for me, that was a huge learn. I just thought everyone must think I'm an awful person because it's happened. And then I'm like, now I think, gosh, I don't know why that was such a weird thought. But yeah.
Well, I mean, it also goes to the power of, you know, your mental health and well-being, and like how, you know, 3 years on or whatever, that what that, you know, and I always say this word wrong, anaesthetist. Yeah. That person, whatever, like they said, you know, in that moment, you remember that, like you hold that. And like, I don't know how accurate it is, but it does sort of make sense to me that, like obstetricians, or I don't know if this is just related to like private obstetricians, but like they're so invested in that moment and the birth actually happening, and then however many weeks later, like it's like nothing to them. Like they've already experienced so many other births after this, so like your story is like they don't even probably remember your name, you know, like but the power of such a simple thing around language in emergency situations like could have such a butterfly effect, you know, like a butterfly flaps its wings and like whatever, like a tornado happens somewhere else kind of thing. Like,
I do, like, I completely agree with you. And I just think the power of language is so, like, even having a doula to explain it would have been so helpful at the time. But I think in my situation, although that was something that I felt, you know, that could have been better, I am really, really grateful for the team that worked on me. Like, I really, I'm not anti-intervention when you need it. I definitely would think that in my situation, I would have made different choices, but in that situation, I would make that decision every single time. And I think, like, there was a time there, and I think language could definitely be considered. Yeah. But I also am really pleased at how they acted and how
of course. Looked if something goes wrong, 1,000% catch me at the hospital.
100%. Yeah,
like that's where I'm going.
It's such an interesting thing to hold. Yeah, like to feel like, oh, this is really it's a really interesting. Is
it paradox or like to paradox, have two different things? Yeah. And so, how old was Reuben when you moved to Australia?
5 months.
Oh my goodness! Wow, holy moly! Okay.
So we hotel quarantined in Melbourne. Yeah, that was a time. Yeah, with a 5-month-old. But again, I actually really reflect fondly on that because it was just like a time, just the three of us. And 5 months is a great time because they're still napping a lot, and
they can't like run away from you.
Yeah, they're not toddlers. So that was good. We moved here. We settled in. I started a new role quite quickly when I was here. I work in eating disorders, so I was able to find a role that I really love. We have family. My husband's family are from here, so I felt like that was a really beautiful soft landing. I really get on with my in-laws, so that was a really lovely. Like that was just. I felt like I was able to sort of land really softly here. Yeah. Of course, it's a huge thing. Oh my gosh! And I think now I look back, I'm like, you moved across the world after a relatively with a diagnosis of PTSD and to Australia. I mean, Australia is not close. Like it is a long ass plane ride. So I was just like, I think on it now, I think, gosh, I don't think I'd ever recommend anyone who's in postpartum to do that. Yeah. But it was the right decision for us at the time, and we had our reasons for it. And I don't regret it at all. So so we landed here, we settled here, we bought our beautiful house and started a renovation. And then honestly, the shock of our lives, found out I was pregnant again.
Yeah. Wow. Had like a moment, especially like moving literally to another continent.
Yes.
Had you had any like moments of like reflection, especially in the context of PTSD, to think, if this happened, if I am pregnant again, if I choose to be pregnant again or whatever, how might my journey be different? Had you had time to think what might you could put in place?
Processing. I processed a lot in that year and a half. So I fell pregnant with Bronte when Marie was 18 months.
Yeah.
I didn't find out I was pregnant though till a bit later. But anyway.
Yeah.
I had done so much processing. I found a brilliant. I had wonderful care in England. They diagnosed me pretty much straight away, and I was seeking support again. As a mental health professional, I knew that this was, I was like, this is what I need to do. And I really value that. There was not a lot of stigma for me to access support. And I sort of really felt like I leaned on my connections for that. So that was really, I realized how privileged I am to be able to access support, and it's not support available for everybody. So,
yeah.
But I was seeing someone weekly in England, bi-weekly to begin with, and then weekly. And then when I arrived here, my non-negotiable was to have a support team for my mental health when I arrived, in terms of like I found a local birth trauma specialist, and I had weekly appointments. So I did a lot of processing. I think my initial response was, I'm never having a baby again. That's fine. Like I had this, and again, I think I was like, I have one in a minute, like my beautiful, beautiful boy, and I just was so like, I just can't.
How could my heart ever share?
Oh yeah, and also just like I am. Like, I don't have capacity to think about another child because this is my child and I am so tired. Like, you know, like, just learning how to mother and what that looks like for me. So, I think I hadn't considered a second baby. When I started to be like, oh, are we choosing to be one and done? And that was a very real conversation for us, and something that we spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about. I was very much of like, I think that's probably that might be the decision for us. But if we were to have another baby, then I would choose a different, like there were considerations at that point that I was very much like, I now know what I didn't know. And I was also really, really passionate about perinatal mental health. As a mental health professional, I'd worked in adult mental health and children's mental health, and then suddenly was like set alight to be supporting women in this time. And so I worked at in the perinatal mental health space when I arrived here, and as well, and did my doula studies, and was kind of like just opened my eyes up. So I think I thought a little bit like, what would I, if I'd had Rue again, like what would I do? What I've done differently? Like a lot. But also his birth story is his birth story. And so taking responsibility for that. And like, as I say, there are some magical things that happened in his labor that I wouldn't take back. So,
that your journey to finding doula training, like how did that like come about?
Yeah. How did that happen?
Yeah. Especially because, you're thinking like, am I one and done? You're like dealing with all this PTSD from birth.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, like I'd like to go see a birth.
I really think it really highlighted to me how doulas are so like a doula can't save you, like you are the only person that can birth your baby.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But I just could really see the impact that I think as a mental health professional as well, I could just see that the doulas are in the room. Yeah. And there's something about having someone on your side and advocating and like giving you the information in a different way.
Yeah.
And I just could really see the impact of that. I was also supported so, like, I cannot stress how much I was supported in postpartum. I honestly thank my lucky stars every single day for that. Yeah. And I think I realized that I was extremely privileged to have that love and support, and that people are often navigating, they've just had a baby So their body is healing, and they are also might be healing emotionally, and they have a little person take over. Like it is so big.
Yeah.
I just thought, I cannot, like, women cannot do this alone. Like, I've literally muddled my way through because of support. Like, there has to be, we deserve better. Like, we just deserve better. So I just felt like really passionate about, like, I have these skills, I'm passionate about it. Turns out I'm really fascinated by birth.
Yeah.
And I just thought, like, I just really want to be, present and person-centered for birthing people.
Yeah. And so you started working as a doula before you became pregnant with Bronte? I
started my training, yes, and doing, like, placements and stuff. And then we found out we were pregnant with Bronte, and that was a wonderful surprise.
Yeah. Excellent.
Bronte, if you ever listen to this, you are a wonderful surprise. Yes. I love you so much.
Yes.
It took us a little bit of processing, I will be honest. Like, I was kind of in shock. Interestingly, I had, or notably something that's really sort of held me through my pregnancy with Bronte was that I had a dream that I was pregnant. People talk about birthing dream, like pregnancy dreams.
I love this. Yeah.
So if you're still listening, you're like, oh, she's going woo woo. This is something that really held me through.
People have spoken about this before. Yeah. It does happen.
Yeah. I had a dream before I found out I was pregnant.
Yeah.
And in this dream, and like, full transparency, I had birthing dreams before, but they were very much like trauma-induced, like trauma dreams.
Okay,
so
sure.
I didn't really love dreaming about birth at this point, but I had this dream about birth, and it was a beautiful dream. And I was in a house at home, and there was this older woman in the house with me who was there helping me labour. I mean, I was labouring, obviously. Women and birthing people do all the work, just to clarify. But there was another person there, and I was at home, and I had a baby at home, and that was I had this, like, feeling of restoration and healing and joy, and the baby was called Eden in my dream.
Wow.
And and it was just a really beautiful dream. And I really felt, like, connected to that dream my whole pregnancy. And then I found out I was pregnant. I woke up and I was like, oh, that was a nice dream. And then I was like, ooh, am I pregnant? And then I took a test that morning. And I was.
Wow.
I was quite pregnant. Yeah.
Wow.
And that was my beautiful Bronte.
Holy moly.
And then, so I was quite shocked. But again, I guess the dream kind of held me in that sort of moment. And I remember texting my best friend and telling my husband. And anyway, my best friend is the godmother of my baby. And I always think about that, like, moment where I found out I was pregnant with her. I was like, oh, and now that's your godmom. So I then very quickly I was shocked, and I wasn't really sure how it happened because I was still taking contraception.
Yeah.
And I was still, like, I was breastfeeding, and I went through, and I just was like,
Bronte was coming here, like, one way or another.
She wanted to be born. She wanted to be here. She was
sending you dreams.
She was planned by someone. Yeah, she wanted to be here, and oh my gosh, I'm so grateful she is.
Wow.
So I was really in shock, went to the GP, because in England you just go to GP, and so I knew that was, and I'd done my training, so I knew that, so I went to the GP and I said, I think I might be pregnant. I've peed on a stick, but I also know I'm pregnant. I can feel now that I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
And I'd like you to take a blood test, please. So, and at that, I have a GP that I really love. I have a really good relationship with her. I felt like we had a really good relationship. And she said to me in that appointment, yes, you can send you for a GP, but I know that you had a cesarean before, so I'll book you. If you are pregnant, we'll go down the cesarean pathway. And at that moment, I thought, I'm not going to swear, but I thought a swear word in my head, because I thought, I haven't even got my head around the fact, I don't even know how many weeks I'm pregnant. Like, I have no idea. I didn't have a regular period. I had no idea. And you are asking me to walk into the place that I was traumatized, as was my husband. Like, I cannot have this conversation with you. Like, I don't even really know. Like, honestly, I haven't even, it's like been 24 hours since I thought I might be pregnant.
Yeah.
I just went into the spiral. And I came out of the appointment and I rang my husband and I said, I will not be birthing in the public system this time. I don't know how we're going to do it or what that looks like, but I cannot have a conversation like that again because it's not psychologically safe for me. Like it took me that's not happening. And at that point I'd done, so I think that was the catalyst of the pregnancy with Bronte. Again, I was sick for 17 weeks. I was really, anyone who has HD will understand it is the pits. But I just did pregnancy this time so differently in the sense that I took full responsibility for me and my baby in that pregnancy. Like every decision I made, I looked into the research. I looked at what tests I was going to do, what tests I wasn't going to do. I knew that a private midwife was the way forward for me. I wasn't especially, I guess the dream sort of made me feel like I always sort of knew deep in my soul that I might have a home birth.
Sure.
But for me, I needed continuity of care. I wasn't going to mess with that again. I hired a doula straight away, and I already knew which doula I'd get because I'd connected with a few doulas of training, and I'd sort of figured out who I was going to get. So I contacted the doula, who I just cannot speak highly enough, and I just think everyone should have it. Like, every birthing person deserves it.
Absolutely.
A doula. Every support person deserves a doula. So I locked in continuity of care straight away. And again, I really acknowledge my privilege that I was able to do that. We shuffled a lot of things around so I could do that. But that was the only way I was going to continue the pregnancy, was if I had support. And for me, it wasn't really about the birthing outcome. Yes, I really I literally had a dream of having a home birth and a low intervention birth. And for me, it was really about, I really wanted to be awake. Yeah. And for me, like, the way that was going to happen was a low intervention birth.
Of course,
But for me, it was really about mapping. I wanted to have that support. So however the mode of birth, that my team knew my story. I didn't have to explain. I didn't have to fight. I didn't have to fight anyone or anything. It was literally, this is the information. This is my story. This is who I am and what I bring to this pregnancy. And this is, and I know that you guys will be on my team and support me. And that for me was so important. And particularly because I was in Australia I was literally here a year before I got pregnant. So I hadn't really formed, well, I feel like I'm going to say, anyone who knows me listening, who knows me personally, will be like, and you form deep connections quick. But I think for me, I was still like finding my tribe here.
Of course,
so having people on my team for the journey was really important. So I did that. I really focused. I felt like I was very solid. I became such a birth nerd that I felt like I sort of knew a lot of the stuff. But the biggest thing for me was working with my partner, my husband, about supporting. We watched Birth Time together. We watched all these brilliant videos of normalizing birth. And what's the other one that you can access that's so good? Not Birth Time. There's another one. Time. We watched some documentaries about that.
I'll ask.
You'll find it.
Well, I'll find it and I'll put it in the description. Yeah. There's quite a few. I thought you were going to say Born at Home, but it wouldn't have been out.
No. I've now watched that. If you haven't watched Born at Home, it's really good. Yeah. So we just did a lot of work together, and I really I listened to this wonderful podcast and learned about Catherine Bell and her birth mapping. Yeah. And so I did this massive birth map around like all the different pathways. And really for me, I was just planning out every avenue of what was going to happen and how I could look after myself and my baby in each avenue. Situation, so I really took like full responsibility for it. The other thing I did differently was that I turned off the noise. I don't know what happens when you tell people that you're pregnant, but people have so much to say. And so I was like, I have people pleased the majority of my life. So this for me was the time where I was like, no, I'm going to listen to myself, my baby. I'm really going to lean into my instincts. In that 9 months, 10 months, I was pregnant with Bronte, it has transformed me. Like, the way that I move around the world is so different. That time was such a time of intentional connection to myself and my intuition and my instincts. And I just have like unlearned so much of that good girl.
Redemptive. Wow.
Yeah. And even perfectionism as well. And
Which is so common. I mean, I definitely can relate to that. And it's, one of the reasons why I'm so glad that I found and chose home birth or, private midwifery care, because if I was in the hospital system, so many times I hear stories and I think that could easily have been me. I'm non-confrontational. I can know things that
advocating for yourself in labour is, I mean, if people do that, good for you, because I think it's near impossible.
Yeah.
You are not, there's this saying, you go to the stars to pick up your babies. I don't believe that. For me, I had to walk through fucking fire to get them.
Yeah.
Advocating for yourself in hospital or in labour is just, that's another reason to get a doula. Just get someone who can.
Yeah, somebody. Yeah.
So that was my pregnancy with Bronte. It was, and again, like I say, people would ask me, where are you birthing? And I didn't really share that with anybody because honestly, I had my idea of my dream. I shared it with a few of my closest people who I knew would support me. My doula, my midwife.
Yeah.
Obviously my husband.
Yeah.
A few people who I felt very safe and close to. But even then, anybody else, I just was very vague.
Yeah.
And honestly, that was my truth. I think I had this sense and this knowing that if I can, I will birth at home. And that's an option for me because that's my risk tolerance. And obviously being a feedback, people have varying risk tolerances.
Well, of course, the GP is automatically booking you in for a C-section. Yeah. So
and the narrative, of course, in the world is, you've we know you've had a C-section, so what's your choice? And I just was not open to that conversation because I felt like I have to make my own decision here. And people would share their opinion or fear with me. And that was hard to just be like, no, that's their reality. That's coming from their point of view. But I really need to go back to what I am thinking, back to what is important to me. Yeah. And so that was my truth at the time. I really was like, I don't know. I'm going to see, I see how I feel. And that was really my truth. But I would always anchor in to the knowledge that actually I would love this to happen. But I had lots of, as I say, I really mapped out pretty much every opportunity. And for me, again, having the doula was something that I knew that if exactly the same thing happened again with my second birth, I've taken responsibility in terms of my support and my postpartum support and my boundaries around. I really mapped out my postpartum, and I knew that that I'd be okay. That I took responsibility for that. Period as well. And I really didn't outsource a lot of knowledge. I really felt like it was my time to really connect into what I knew about myself and my body.
Yeah.
And that's hard when other people have had opinions about your body and all that stuff, being sort of navigating the world. But I felt really strongly that was about that.
Yeah.
Can I tell you about my birthing day?
Yeah. So I just really wanted to touch on, so you got a referral for your midwife. Yeah. Was it from that GP or?
Yes. I went back to that GP and said, I'd like a private midwife.
Your automatic C-section plan. Yeah,
she pushed back. She pushed back. She pushed back quite hard. And that was my first opportunity to advocate for myself. And I did. And I got the referral.
Cool.
And I interviewed a few midwives.
Yeah.
I really went into my gut feeling.
Yeah.
And I knew as soon as I met the midwife that I hired that she was going to be
the one for you.
For me. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was an older woman. Yeah. And she was just a complete I just love her. I couldn't speak
a dream.
Yeah. Literally a dream. Yeah.
A dream, yeah.
And she was so great. Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's so special that you've had this dream and it's folding out, but it sounds like, so like you've said, the main thing about having the private midwifery care and the doula was to feel in any potentiality psychologically safe.
Yeah.
At what point did you feel, or maybe before that, especially because I know we chatted very quickly before we started recording about the whole professional indemnity thing.
Yes.
Did any of the midwives that you interviewed have any thoughts or comments about you being a VBAC mum? No.
Cool. The midwife that I hired was like, great. So where are we birthing? I remember our first birth, she was like, great. Are you birthing in the water or are you birthing on land? And I was like, oh, I think I'm going to birth on land.
Yeah.
I feel like I think I'm going to birth on land. She was just not phased at all. Yeah. And for me, I think that was one of the reasons I hired her, because I was so phased by my first birth that someone who was like, great, let's talk about where you're going to birth now. Yeah. It was such a wonderful narrative for me. And the way that she talked about it was so trusting in my ability. It was just having that person to be like, oh yeah, you got this. Like, this is going to be fine. Yeah.
And so I guess also I wanted to know, so your husband, obviously, because we talk about birth trauma for the woman or the birthing person, but the partner, how freaking scary must that be for them? How, when you've proposed this, oh, well, I'm not going to have this experience here, and these are my other options, and one of them could be birth at home. Did he have any thoughts or concerns or feedback around that?
So my husband is, as I said, my favorite person in the world. Yeah. And he processes things quite different to me, I'd say.
Okay. Yeah.
I think we are attracted to each other because we are quite opposite.
Yeah, wow.
And it's his story to tell in terms of his experience of Rue's birth. But he was very pro home birth.
Yeah, wow.
But he was, to be honest with you, Elsie, he was just pro me. Yeah. He was like, so whatever beautiful. You want, whatever you feel safe doing,
back you. Yeah.
I think when I talk to him about it now, he's still shocked. I think it still shocks him how that birth just stays, it's just not one day. It stays with you your whole life. And I think he's still like, wow, that day that Rue was born, we will never, ever forget that. We can grow from it. We can learn each other. It doesn't take away from the mother or the parent that we are, or the gorgeousness of our child. But it's something that we had to move through together. And I think when we were pregnant with Bronte, Jake was like, nah, it's got to be we have to take control from this point. And again, like I say, I wasn't we were exploring so many different options for us. And so we were talking about, but at the end of the day, he was really putting me in the driver's seat. This is your body. And credit where credit's due. He did a lot of work as well in terms of how to be the best birth support partner. And I think the first time around, we just thought, we're in love, we'll wing it, oxytocin, we can do that. We're great at snogging. Let's do that, which we did a lot of. But I think the second time around, he was like, no, there's more nuance to that. And Em needs support in a different way. And I'm going to really invest in learning how to do that. And again, our doula was so helpful in supporting him to be present for me. Yeah. There's nothing like that.
It's beautiful.
That different energy in the space is there. So, and again, the other brilliant thing was that all of our appointments were at home with a private midwife, and so he was able to be at every appointment. Yeah, the first time, he wasn't even able to be at some scans. It really was just you see the belly grow. There was not that involvement or connection until the birthing day. Well, in my case, birthing 4 days, but I think this time around, he could hear the heart. That was such a different. It was so much more involved. Of course, and that's again that sort of element of taking responsibility for that was really beautiful for us as a couple as well. Yeah.
So at how many weeks or at roughly what point did you sort of lock into home birth?
Mentally or
any of it?
I was open-minded the whole time. Yeah. In terms of if I need to go, I think that element of, I think if I'm honest, that element of what happened with, I was there might be a possibility. Something and that's happen, okay. Yeah.
But I suppose in terms of, at some point you have to start thinking, oh, are they going to bring the stuff to my house?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, actually. It's a good question.
Yeah, that's all right.
I think because of mentally, it was all, again, I was just trusting I would say I felt a deep sense of calm.
Yeah.
Like by the time I was like in my third trimester, I'd worked through all my fears. I'd worked through a lot of what was going on. And I was just really, honestly, I got to, and I can't believe I'm saying this. And as I reflect on it, I'm just like, wow, that's so cool. Yeah. I got to a point in my third trimester, which I was just excited to birth again. Wow. And I was just like, I can't wait to see what I learned from this, what my baby teaches me, what I learned from my husband, our connection. Yeah. I was just really excited. Yeah. So,
were you, because I guess one thing in why you said that, Jacob.
Yeah.
Jacob has family here. Had you, like, one major difference with having subsequent births is the presence of previous babies. Yeah. Was Reuben going to, like, be present in a home birth setting? No.
No. I think it's beautiful when siblings are present.
Yeah.
It was, this was my birth.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be fully present. Like something that I still feel sadness around is that I wasn't awake when I delivered Rue.
Of course. Yeah.
For me, I was like, I want to be fully present for this experience, and having Rue there would have taken my attention away. And I was like, and I wanted to be fully present for every surge. I wanted to be fully present for what was going on in my body. I wanted to be able to access the intuition without distraction. Yeah. And Rue was 2 at the time, and and being 2,
not a great doula.
No, and well, maybe I didn't give it a chance, to be honest. But he did wake up when I was in labour, and he was like, "Oh, Mummy's being a tiger."
Oh,
and it just made me. Yeah, I love that. I remember that so vividly. And so, he was cheerleading me in that moment. So
so he was taken to Jacob's family or something. Yeah. Do you want to walk through the lead up and the birth of Bronte then?
Yeah. So I went to 41 weeks with Bronte.
Amazing.
I felt no sense of urgency to have her.
Yeah.
I really lent into that waiting. I sort of prepared myself better in that sense, or differently. There's no better or worse, but I prepared myself differently, and I really cherished every moment, every day. I rested way more. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I was excited, but I also was like, that's okay, she'll come in her own time.
Yeah.
Again, having the private midwife, I had no worries or pushback about anything. I just felt. And I was intentional about blocking, and I actually encourage a lot of my clients to do this. I just turned my phone, I just had my midwife and my doula on emergency bypass, and everything else I was just like, nah, it's just noise. I just don't need that. And my labour the sort of events of my labour with Bronte are pretty much the same.
Wow,
I just took a completely different pathways. It's really interesting. So I should have said with Rue, I lost my mucus plug as well that morning when I woke up.
Okay, sure.
So I woke up on the Thursday. Yeah. Lost my plug, texted my doula to say, I've lost my plug, which means if it's anything like last time, baby's coming. And she was like, yep, great, send me a picture. So I did, the vibes. I'm sure you go there.
Yes.
And was in early labour. So all of Thursday was in early labour. Ignored it, carried on. My sister-in-law came in for lunch. I ignored it, didn't tell her I was in labour. Apart from getting really hot, my cheeks would get really hot, and I was like, is my cheeks giving me away? Just sort of potted around, nourished my body, got my music on. Yeah, oh gosh, early labour is so fun for me. I find even thinking about it, I'm like, it was just such a nourishing time. Yeah. Went for walks, was intentional about time with my son. Decided that was the time to clean out my Tupperware drawer. All of the things are important.
Yeah.
Yes, that was Thursday. Went to bed. Things ramped up Thursday night, and I thought, tonight's the night. Fell asleep. Woke up occasionally. Woke up on Friday, another day.
Yeah.
Got up, had a coffee, had a nice breakfast, told Jake that he shouldn't go. I was like, you need to finish work. Like, this baby is on its way, but I just don't know when.
What does he do for work?
He works for an engineering consultancy.
Okay.
I think. I honestly can't really tell you exactly what my husband does.
That sounds good enough.
Like something in this corporate industry.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? I feel like I should be able to elevate what he does anyway.
This story's
that's
about
another
you,
story.
so it's okay. Yeah.
So he finished up at work.
Yeah.
We had a beautiful day together, walked around, bounced my ball. I sent my son to the grandparents' house. I just thought I just really want some time without a toddler on my person.
Of course.
So I did lots of bouncing on my ball, was in contact with my doula. Things just plodded on. I had a contraction every 10 minutes for Thursday and Friday and Saturday.
Oh my goodness.
And I knew I was in labour, and I would like have to breathe through the contractions. And there were some that were much more, would take a lot more from me.
Yeah.
There was one contraction I remember where I literally dropped to my knees.
Yeah. Well.
And then the next one, it would just be like, oh, I can just manage this through my breathing.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like, it was really irregular and different.
Yeah.
I had a midwife appointment already booked on that Friday, so my midwife came round, just encouraged me, and she was just wonderful. She just was like, what's your intuition saying? I said, I think I'm having the baby on the full moon, and the full moon was the next day.
Wow. Yeah.
And we like chatted, and it was lovely, and she just supported me through the contractions that I had at the time. She's like, you're doing great, this is perfect, like just keep doing what you're doing. I won't lie to you, when I woke up on the Saturday morning, I was pretty pissed off. I was like, I got to the point where I was like, I have been having contractions every 10 minutes for 2 days. Like, let's ramp this up. Like, I want to go for a walk.
Yeah.
I ended up calling my sister, and that's sometimes all you need. It's just your sister and having a chat with someone you love. And I ended up bringing Reuben back home, because I was like, I think I need him back, because at that point he'd been like sleeping and staying at the grandparents' house. I was like, I just need him back. So I brought him back. Just had a normal day. Things definitely were at that point. Jake, I was like, you need to take him away for a bit because I just need some time. So Jake took him swimming. And then that evening I put my son to bed, and we did the normal routine. I put my son to bed. And as soon as I put him to bed, I thought, we're having a baby tonight.
Yeah.
And I just had that sense, like I just shut his door, came outside. We were watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine, like we always do.
Brilliant. Yeah.
I think we got takeaway, and we started playing a board game. And I suddenly just was like, in the middle of the game, I was like, we have to stop now. Like, I cannot play a board game. I have to now birth this baby out of my body.
On to more important things.
That was about 9 o'clock. Yeah. And I had dreamt of that moment. Like, I felt like because it was so different to Rue's birth, I could like set up my space. Yeah. And it wasn't in a hospital, and I had my husband with me. And so that, again, like everything was just like, like reclaiming that space. So we had, I had organized to have like a box of like fun labor things put out. So like we put our affirmations up and our like festoon lights on, and we opened the back doors, and the full moon was full.
Wow.
And I bought myself a bunch of flowers when I was in labor, so I could have them. I just treated myself like the goddess I am, to be honest.
Yes.
And I was sort of swaying through them. I put on my, one of my shirts that my mum had bought me ages ago. And it's one of those, do you have that like sense of, for some reason I have a real attachment to this shirt. Yeah. And I was like, I'm going to wear this as like, so I feel close to my mum, and even though she's on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
And different, like last time I told no one I was in labor. Last time I told everyone I was in labor. This time I told no one. I was like, this is our time. Like, I'm going to this is reclamation. We decided to go to bed because we were like, let's lie down. I think I lay down for like 20 minutes. Yeah. And then I was like, right, I'm on all fours.
Wow.
And my husband was next to me just doing his Sudoku, crosswords, just like, I didn't really like being touched I didn't really like being touched when I was having a contraction, but I just needed that presence of someone. One of the best things about having a home birth is I felt so comfortable using my voice. And I cannot tell you how healing that was for me. I felt like I was finding the voice that I've always had but not ever used. I think I've had a history of mental health stuff and eating disorders and that sort of thing. So I feel like reclaiming that part of me to I'm just going to take space. Like, I'm going to use my voice to claim space. And there was something about using my voice to reclaim this birth, but reclaim this voice for my daughter. I was like, I want her to have a voice in this world. And it is hard, as we know, sometimes to be a woman in the world. And I was like, I'm claiming my voice so I can pass this voice on. Whoa. So I really took the voice, for me, that was the best tool in labour. I loved using my voice, and I was noisy. And it was loud. Yeah. And it was wonderful. And I stayed in bed all fours. At one point, I think Jake was like, your voice has changed. So he messaged my doula and was like, hey, can you come? Like, I think it's probably time that you come. She'd been on standby, obviously, for a few days.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, can I just listen to a contraction? And she listened and she was like, I'm on my way. And she came at, like, one of the things I sometimes think is that we can often invite people into our space too soon.
Yeah.
But this was the perfect time because I felt like I just wanted that. I had the few hours just with Jake, and then suddenly it was, I had the support of another support person, and she brought just different energy, and she was everything I needed in that moment. Yeah. I moved to the bathroom. We just renovated our bathroom, and so I was in this shower that I dreamed of. Yeah. Literally. Yeah. And water for me was like, I used water in Rue's labour. Like, I'd had a bit of a shower, but something about being in your own shower, like I could just put the plug in, or I could just move around, and the acoustics in my bathroom, I just sounded like a primal goddess. Yeah. That's when my doula arrived, my son was picked up by my wonderful mother-in-law.
Perfect. Yeah.
And that he gave me a big cuddle. He told me I was being a tiger, and I said, yes, I am. And I just used that as fuel to my wonderful birthing
so
vibes.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I then got out the shower, and as soon as I got out the shower, transition hit. That was about 3 a.m. Yeah. That was about the full moon. And let me tell you, she called. Like, that transition, like, if you're listening for a pain-free birth, this is not me. I worked hard to meet my baby. Yeah. And I loved every minute of it. Like, I felt like every sensation I had, I was fully present. I wouldn't describe it as painful, but it was like, full on. I can feel it now if I think about it. Yeah. And I transitioned hard, and I did not want to transition. I did not want to go through the portal. I was really firm on not going. And then I was like, I'm going. And again, this, the power of affirmations for me were really great. Like, I felt like they really grounded me.
Were you saying them, or was somebody else saying them?
My partner was.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And I had a birthing track that I had that also had affirmations. So I went through the portal of transition. That was a time. And then as I came out the other end, my doula said, I think it might be time to call the midwife. And at that point I said, I need to go. We need to go now. It's time to go. Like, I need to go to hospital. Like, I can't, like, it was just labour. Wow, yeah. And at one point I was saying all this shit, and I was saying to my husband, just take me to hospital. I need the epidural. Like, I don't think I was in denial that I was having a baby. I think because of, I was just expecting the ball to drop and like an emergency to happen. Yeah. And I remember saying all this, and then my doula was like, why don't you just go for a wee? Because, they tell you to do that often. So I went to the toilet and have a wee, and I was in the, like, just resting between at this point they were coming thick and fast, but I was just in the middle of resting, and I said to Jake and my doula, I said, don't, just completely ignore what I'm saying. This is all labour smack. I don't need any of this. Don't listen to me. And I literally then, like, the next contraction was like, you need to help. Like, but one of the most brilliant things that my doula, and I'll always remember her saying, is that you're doing it. You're amazing. Like, this is it. This is, the time is now. And I was like, yes, the time is now. I'm claiming this for me. So my midwife arrived. Her presence was, I won't forget. Like, she just walked in, put her stuff down, and it was just like it just was so calming to me. She put her hands on my shoulders, and she just said, this is the holy grail of birth. You are doing it. And I was like, this is the holy grail of birth, and I am going to have a baby in my living room. Like, this is happening for me. Yeah. And yeah, she was amazing. And I pleaded with her, and I was like, no. I was in transition. If you know what that's like, it's hard work. But I pleaded with her. She told me to go, like, and I was like, I need to have we talked about not having any vaginal examinations, VEs in labor. But in that time I was like, I just need you to check where I'm at. I was in denial that I was having a baby. That for me, the transition was like the biggest crisis of confidence was, and I think I hear this a lot with people who are pursuing a VBAC, that their crisis of confidence is that they're having a vaginal birth. And I was just like, I can't believe it. This is not happening for me. And so I asked her 4 times, please, can you check me? Please, can you check me? Please, can you check me? And on the 4th time, she said, okay, I will. And we did that. And it was a beautifully consenting process. Like she was brilliant at giving. And again, it was just the night and day compared to my experience in the hospital. And she just said, do you want to know the number? And I said, yeah, I bloody well do, because this is getting intense. And she was like, you're almost fully dilated. Like you've done this all by yourself. Where do you want to go? And I was like, ooh. So again, it just gave me that sense of like empowerment. Like I can go anywhere I want to go now. Yeah. So I went into the shower. I was in the shower for a while. And then I started pushing. And as soon as I got out the shower, because I'm like, I don't want to be here. Sort of moved around. I went onto the bed, pushed on the bed. This was my first experience of pushing. Of course, yeah. I've done a lot of, like, I listened to a lot of people who explained sort of that stage. I don't know if I loved that stage. I found it to be like, everyone was like, oh, you can work with the sensation. It's a really like nice stage of the labor. But for me, it was like, at that point, I was like, I just want to have a baby now. I did a lot of hard work. I pushed hard for a while. In lots of different positions. But again, it was just, nobody told me what position to go in. I just sort of moved instinctively, followed my body. My water still hadn't broken at that point. So I then went onto the toilet and then had a contraction. My waters broke. And as soon as my waters broke, the ring of fire was, let me tell you, the ring of fire. Like, I have this video because my doula took loads of videos and I was going, oh gosh, it burns. And so,
I am always just like gobsmacked when people say that they did not experience the ring of fire. I was like,
that was not me.
That was not my experience because
I felt that ring of fire.
Yeah, me too.
But at that moment, I felt the ring of fire, and both my doula and my midwife were dancing, and my second midwife had arrived, and they were dancing, and they were just so excited for me. And I'm going to cry thinking about it. I had this moment with my husband where he just started crying, and I just looked at him, and he said to me, babe, this is happening. Like, the dream is happening. You're having a baby at home. And I just started sobbing. And I was like, I'm having a baby at home. Like, I'm doing this all by myself. Like, nobody has done anything. Like, I've been it's all on my terms. I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't. And also, I think it was the first time that I actually had to trust myself and my body. And for someone who's had body image stuff happen before, like, and having my husband say that to me, like, this is like, you are doing this on your own. Like, it was just so wonderful. And then at that point, my midwife said, so do you want to have the baby on the toilet? Because her head was coming out. Yeah. And I was like, no, this is not how this story ends. Like, I am not having a baby on the toilet. Like, after all this, in no way. So my husband, God bless him, literally, like, I don't know how I did it. He just lifted me, a whole pregnant me, and like took me into the living room. Yeah. And I tried one position to push where he was holding me from behind and I was like sat and pushing that way. And it just did not feel right. I think I did 2 pushes and I didn't feel right. Yeah. And then I thought, right, I'll go on my hands and knees. So I like flopped forward, in all your pushing glory. And I have this picture and I have that blue line. Honestly, I have this picture of this blue line. I literally look at it all the time. I think it's fascinating. Yeah, it is. And I pushed on one go on all fours, and I said, it just doesn't feel productive. It does not feel productive. And my midwife confirmed, said, yeah, it doesn't look as productive. Like, and then I just said, I need to be left. Like, I want to do this on my own. I have this video of me saying, I want to do this on my own. I just want to be left alone. And I full on goddess squatted, like stark naked, body like squatted, like in if you know yoga, that like yoga squat. Clinged to like my two sides of what one's like the TV, stand thing.
Yeah.
And I roared. And I reclaimed and I roared. And my baby was born in one push.
Wow.
Like I just got into that position and I started roaring, and Bronte, which means thunder.
Brilliant.
And that's like reclaiming that space.
Yeah.
And I birthed her in one push into Jake's hands. And she just came out in one push straight into her dad's hands, and Jake put her straight on my chest. And that was hands down the best moment of my life. It was indescribable. I have never felt anything like it. Like I can't even describe it. Like the power that I felt, the healing that I felt, the power that I felt is indescribable. And I will want to do it again and again and again.
It's addictive. Holy moly.
That was it. That was Sunday morning, full moon Sunday morning. She was born. She was 4.5 kilos.
Brilliant.
A beautiful, beautiful 4.5 kilos. She just made a small squeak and nuzzled in and latched pretty much as soon as I put her on my chest.
Yeah.
And I just spent the next hour in tears and in shock. And I just kept saying, I've done it. I can't, but like, I've done it. Like I was thanking me.
Yeah. Yeah.
and everyone.
Yeah.
And I was just, honestly, I was just beside myself. And, my husband helped me onto my sofa, which was just literally, I was on the living room floor. So he just put me on the sofa and I lay there and we were waiting for the placenta, and I was awake, and I had this hour of the golden hour that I've been told about and didn't really understand it. And honestly, I was kind of not really there. I think I was still in labor land. Of course, I hadn't birthed the placenta, so you're still in labor land.
Yeah.
But I was, it was just an indescribable feeling. And also to see that Jake was able to be there and catch her
the whole way. Yeah.
And no one touched the baby. I didn't want anyone to wipe her down. I think she was covered in vernix. She was on me. We was completely skin to skin. I had a blanket put over us, which was, again, something that reminded me of home. And someone made pancakes at some point, and we had pancakes and tea.
Brilliant. Oh my God.
It was just this wonderful Sunday morning. And I remember seeing someone walking their dog past our window, and I wanted to be like, I just birthed the baby.
Yeah.
That's the best day of my life. Like, I was just like, you have no idea.
Yes.
And
I don't know if it's the same in the UK, but in the Netherlands, where my husband's from, it's like very common, like once you have a baby, you do like announce that it's a disservice to like women and birthing people, but they put a stork, usually like a picture of a stork like in the front yard or the front window, or like, welcome baby or something. So it is like a declaration that like the baby is here, the baby is born.
And the birthing person has done something incredible. Like it's incredible. Like however you birth, I think it's incredible. Like I honestly, women who like however you birth, I think it's just absolutely incredible. And I think like there's this narrative around, I think women are strength, like women birthing people are strength personified. Like it's just incredible. And so it was great. And we had all these wonderful plans to wait for the placenta. We waited an hour. I went to the toilet. Placenta wasn't coming, but I knew that it was coming. Like I was like, I think it's coming, but I was over it at that point. I was like, I just want to snuggle.
Yeah.
So I said, like, can I have the syntocin injection? And I did, and that worked for me. Like I didn't plan to have that, but at that moment I was like, I'm done now. Like I really feel I want to walk away from the portal.
Yeah.
And also I was tired. Like it
of
had
course,
been a long few
days.
And then my doula just did the most beautiful, like she helped me to the, baby and ceremonial cord cutting again. That was new. We didn't get to do that with Rue. So that was really wonderful. I think we did that together as well, because I was like, I want to be part of that. And then my doula helped me shower. And that TLC, like having someone with you, and like your body is so, you know, that feeling after you've birthed, like it's still quite foreign. You're finding your gravity. Yeah. And that, again, night and day, like I didn't get to shower for literally days after I had Reuben. But with this, it was like pretty much a few hours later, and my doula helped me like wash my legs and my hair and dry me. And that was just such a kind offering. Like I feel like that was such a kind thing to do. And that was it really. Like we ended up going to, like, it was always part of my plan. I wanted to get everyone sort of checked out. So we did that. And then we were home, and it was home, and I was on cloud 9. And I honestly, she's like 16 months old, and I'm still on cloud 9. Like the whole, and I felt like as I'm sharing this story, I really feel like it's actually one story. It's not two different stories for me. Like it's a story of becoming who I am and becoming the mother and the person that I am. And both of their stories are their stories, but it felt to me like one experience of like reclamation and becoming. And of course it's really inspired. I think I bring that into my like everyday life. Like how do I try, like, do I trust, what's my instinct saying? What do I think? Like I don't want to, like, I don't always have to outsource knowledge. Like I know some things. And that sort of power, and also what I want to pass on to my children as well. Like I'm really conscious that when I share these stories, there were challenges in Rue's birth, and there was so much healing in Bronte's birth, but there were challenges in Bronte's birth, and there was so much healing in Rue's birth. So I just feel like their stories, or my story of birthing, has been absolutely transformational. And however you birth your baby, you are a flipping goddess. Like it is incredible having babies. And you know, you wouldn't wish the world on, like, you wouldn't wish birth trauma on anyone, but like for me, that sort of story of it's just the most precious thing I've ever experienced. So
it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And like, I just, you know, if people make it to the end of this episode, just want to emphasize that, you know, sometimes, you know, mums say, oh, I have this many birth stories, blah, blah, blah. Like, do you want me to share just like one or two? And I'm like, no, like if you want to share your story, you kind of have to share the whole thing, because not every single birth like is different in some way. There might be similarities, but and it's like, an evolution of yourself and your, you know, stage in life. And like it's important to see like the whole picture, like the whole rainbow, just like not one color, you know. And so I'm really, really grateful for you being vulnerable and open and sharing your story. Before we finish up, to finalize our thoughts on the stupid professional indemnity insurance issue. So as it stands right now, what category, like, would you, you know, come June?
No, I would not be able to have a baby at home.
Okay, cool. That's messed up.
Because I had a cesarean, a primary cesarean. I also am someone who would say that I manage my mental health every day. I manage it very effectively, but I would say, like, you know, that's important to me to, just like I manage my physical health. So there's a category there. I have had COVID as well in the past, so I'm another, like, that would risk me out.
Knock you out as well,
And to be quite honest, if it's something, if it passes and we, you know, we could, that it's only a certain risk criteria that midwives can support, that would prevent me having any more babies. And it would, and if I were to have another baby, then I would probably make different choices. Because it was such a, I can't imagine anything different now. Like I think it feels safer to me to have a baby on my terms in my home, or at least having, I don't know. That's
whatever you want. It's safer for you to have whatever birth you set out.
And it's interesting, like, as I'm talking about it, I'm like, actually, I don't know how I feel. Like, if I have another baby, I will lean into my instincts and what I feel, but I don't know what that will be. I might feel that my instinct might say, have a baby in the hospital.
Yeah.
That's where we feel safe. Me and my baby feel safe. It might say, birth at home with a midwife. It might say, birth at home in your own. Like, I don't know what my instincts will tell me at the time, but it's up to me to decide that as a person with
human being.
Human rights.
Yeah.
So I thank you for all the work you're doing in this space, because it's really important.
Thank you. Thank you so much.